everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here in person and by tuning in to this recording to see this presentation from Anastasia Munyadi, who is SUSE ITD 2019. Today, she will speak about her topic called Systemic Racism and Tribalism, a Cancer Against Equality and Justice. She's planned an excellent presentation, very engaging, so we're excited to hear from her. She is a published author. She is a school teacher at a secondary school for girls in her home country of Zambia, and contributes, I think, every day to the work to be done for vulnerable children through her leadership training capacities at her church, very involved in terms of civic engagement and just the dedication that she exhibits to topics such as this one, which is a very timely topic, both here in the United States with the racism we're experiencing, but also worldwide. So without further ado, I will let you take the stage, Anastasia. Thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you so much, Katie. I will just go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay, so like Katie has already introduced me, my name is Anastasia Munyati. I am from Lusaka, Zambia, and an alumni of 2019. So I went to ITD also. So my topic is looking at systemic racism and tribalism, a cancer against equality and social justice. So I just have an outline of how this presentation is going to go. And like Kerry has mentioned, I intend that this is a very interactive session. So I won't be doing much of the talking, but we will all be doing talkings, like we will all have contributions to make, especially coming from different backgrounds in different countries that we come from. So I do ask that you all feel comfortable to make comments, contributions, and please be as engaged as you can be. Okay. So to start with, I want us to look at the picture that is here. So it's a picture that is looking at the differences between equality and equity. And I just want to hear your views on what comes to mind when you see this picture.
May I?
Yes, yes, Ave, you can go.
I think equity is the most important thing to not only to give the same opportunity for everyone, but to get the best result for everyone, the best outcome. Even I share with you the same resource at a specific level, you don't reach what you need to reach to equal me. And it's very clear from the photo that on the left, the three of them have the 3 steps to stand on, but it doesn't give them equal opportunity. It makes someone higher, the other is lower, and one doesn't see at all. So we need to modify our perception of equality or our trial to reach equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Abe. Anybody else? So somebody has just joined us. You are welcome. So just looking at the picture that's in front of you, if you can see the picture, and I just want to hear your views in terms of what comes to mind when you see the picture that you're looking at.
Okay, is there an option for raising the hand so that we do not interrupt you when we want to answer?
Yes, anyone.
Okay, fine. So I believe here as based on what Abira has said regarding equality, yes, equality when you give the same amount for all, whereas equity has to do with matching the abilities of the people. So as you can see in the second picture, it has to do with the abilities and what one needs more than the other so that they become in a way equal to the other. So it matches the ability. It has to do more with the deficiencies, with the needs and abilities of people. But regarding the two pictures here, we can see that equality has to do with giving the same amount of the needs for all people, whereas equity has to do more with matching the needs and abilities. So it depends on matching everyone's abilities and needs, and so that he become equal to the others. So it doesn't have to do with equality as long or as much as it has to do with the needs this person need in order to be equal to the other. Matching is abilities. So the second picture has to do with matching abilities and needs more than this is what is meant by equity. So somebody may need more than the other social, whatever, social justice or whatever, or deficiencies, and they need to more than the others. This is my point.
Thank you so much for sharing. So obviously, when you look at a topic like this, you might want to know why I got interested in discussing systemic racism and tribalism. So different places and different backgrounds we're experiencing, it's literally one and the same thing, except it changes first when you come to Africa, and it changes first when you go to Europe and the USA and all these other different countries that we come from. But at the end of the day, what we are advocating for and what we want to achieve in every aspect of our lives is to get to a place where we have equity, equality and social justice in terms of how we define it and what we want to see, what is the dream that we want to get to at the end of the day. So I just want us to have conversation around this topic, looking at the different countries we're coming from and what you are experiencing, so you can use real examples and reality in your countries, so that at the end of the day we see what we can do and what role we can play as educators, because these, I believe, are conversations we should start having from a very young age, so that I grow up having these conversations and getting to helping each and every person to realize that this that I want. So I had structured that we play these videos on screen, but Katie has advised me that because of the differences in the internet connectivity, we'll have to play this video on our different sites. So I'm going to ask Katie to just share that link on the group so that we can watch that video just now.
Excellent. Thank you, Anastasia. I put the link in the chat, so take the time on your own device to view it now, and then we'll reconvene.
Hi Owls, it's Lucas. November's Social Justice Month, so we're gonna go find out what that means to you.
When I think about social justice, I think about the distribution between wealth, privilege, and opportunity.
Social justice means to me making sure people are accountable to treating everyone the same.
To me, it means equality and involvement for everyone.
I feel like social justice means a lot of equality, and I feel like everybody should be treated the way that they want to be treated. And with Social Justice Month right now, I feel like everyone's starting to lean towards that.
Basically, you want people to be able to have things that they need. It's a basic human right to have social justice happen, because honestly, we're all human at the end of the day. We all need affordable housing, affordable healthcare. We all have to live.
Basically, social reform. Basically, how we are indoctrinated into society and have to change that in order to make a better world for everybody.
So essentially, social justice means that marginalized groups, be it race, sexual orientation, whatever, get the same treatment as the dominant group in a culture.
So social justice means all people in communities having equal access to different opportunities, different privileges, and different forms of wealth.
Social justice means everybody getting treated properly and equally.
Social justice to me means to give everybody the opportunity to succeed in their personal and their professional life. and also to give them the means to do so.
Be sure you check our website and follow us on social media for all things social justice and all events going on.
Yes, so from the video that you have just seen, what does social justice mean to you?
Go ahead, Abir.
Yes, I will not add too much. Actually, social justice is, from my point of view, is to have equal opportunity in life, to be dealt with in a human way, as everyone should. No prioritizing or categorizing for people, no kind of discrimination for other people. All these things are practices of social justice. Not to be dealt with according to my religion, color of skin, whatsoever makes a difference between people should not be a point to go from in dealing with us.
Thanks, Abir.
Thank you.
Hello, can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes. Should I advance the slide?
Yes, please, you can. Okay, so we're just going to look at a few definitions of the key terms that we're looking at. So the first one is equality, which we have defined, I think, from perspectives from Sahar and Abia. Equality looks at the right of different groups of people to have a similar social position and receive the same treatment. So it is about ensuring that every individual has an equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents, regardless of their socioeconomic background, their race, their disability, their sex, their sexual orientation. So it's focused on recognizing that people are different, and each different individual groups of people must be protected and must be given the opportunities to have their needs met, regardless of what backgrounds they come from. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have a picture there that just sort of puts what social justice is in brackets. And then you have different words that people will say when they think about social justice. So they would say equality, rights. So these would be civil rights, people having access to lawyers, people having access to legal aid, looking at the labor laws and economics, taxation. Social justice has to do with the politics. We're looking at different genders, whether people are disabled, they have different disabilities, so there's no discrimination. And, you know, that's just like different words that people will throw at you when they hear the word social justice. So social justice is the view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. There's a political philosophical concept that is originally centered around equality among people along various social dimensions. And in economic terms, social justice efforts usually seek to elevate or degrade the economic status of various groups defined by group identity or demographic characteristics like race, gender, and religion. So different people will have access to different economic amenities and social amenities based on their needs, and there shouldn't be any form of discrimination. So usually political aspects and politics usually come into big play when we are looking at matters of social justice. So depending on where you come from, you will see politics at play when we are talking about social justice. And I'm using the word tribalism because this is, when we look at Africa, Africa has thousands and thousands of tribes. And like, for example, in Zambia, which is a country that I come from, for example, we have 72 tribes in total. This is why it's difficult for us like to come up with which tribe should be used as an official language that we should all speak. This is why we speak English. And of course, because we're colonized by Britain, so we speak English. But even after we gained independence, it was hard to pick a tribe that we could all speak. It's easy for countries like Tanzania and Botswana and South Africa to have one tribe as a dominant tribe because they only have very few languages that they speak, but we have so many, so we couldn't pick on one because then one tribe would think they're more superior than the others. So when we look at tribalism, the word is also used to describe situations where people are overly loyal to their own group. It is a state of being organized in or advocating for a tribe or tribes. In terms of conformity, tribalism may also refer to a way of thinking or behaving in which people are more loyal to their tribe than to their friends, their country, or any other social group. Some tribes will feel more superior than others, and this is why you've seen a lot of cases in Africa where we're having genocides, xenophobia, and all these things occurring, especially if you look at the genocide that happened in Rwanda in the 90s. That was basically because the Hutus and Tutsis, one of them thought they were more superior than the other, and they decided to start discriminating on the other tribe. Politics came into play, and then we ended up having genocides where millions of people were killed. So the picture that you're looking at is just showing you. So I turned off my video because I'm thinking then my network is better if my video is off. So the picture you're looking at is looking at just the effects of tribalism on the left side, where you have different tribes fighting against each other. Then the picture on your right, those are not dead bodies. Those are just people in Rwanda. This was last year when they're commemorating, I think that's 20 years of the Rwandan genocide. So when you go to Rwanda today, you'll find they have a museum which was established in memory of the Rwandan genocide. And it's a really, really sad sight when you go there. I haven't been, but I've seen stories about it, and I've met people who've been there, and what they have experienced there is not good. So these are just things that will happen as a result of tribalism. So we look at racism, which is usually defined as practices and actions reflecting the belief that humanity is divided into distinct biological groups called races, and that members of a certain race share certain attributes which make that group as a whole less desirable, more desirable, inferior, or superior. It is based on the idea that one race is superior and has the right to dominate others, or that a particular racial group is inferior to others. So when we talk about racism, I don't want to go into details and talk about it, but we're going to see two videos that will look at the history of racism, especially in the US. So of course, we know that everything regarding racism starts with the slave trade. Black people being sold from Africa, and we know of the triangular slave trade, the route that was used during the slave trade, and people ending up in Europe, America, and all these different places. So it is from that background that most of these matters concerning racism originate from. Okay, so looking at systemic racism, so it can be defined as an infrastructure of rulings, ordinances, or statutes promulgated by a sovereign government or authoritative entity, whereas such ordinances and statutes entitles one ethnic group in a society certain rights and privileges, while denying other groups in that society the same rights and privileges because of long established cultural prejudices, religious prejudices, fears, myths, and xenophobia held by the entitled group. So I gave an example of where the origin of racism, especially in the USA and in Europe, will come from. So you find that there are certain belief systems that have been in cultural systems that have been embedded in these existing systems that perpetuates racism, and it sort of feels like it's a normal thing, but it's not really normal. So policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society organization, and that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people and unfair or harmful treatment of others based on race. So there's a link to a video that I would like for us to see, if you can just share that link on the group, Katie.
Structural, institutional, and systemic racism broadly refer to the system of structures that have procedures or processes that disadvantage racial minorities, and particularly Black people. It refers to the rules, practices, and customs once rooted in law with residual effects that reverberate throughout society, each with their own nuances. A good example of systemic racism is redlining, a system once used by banks and the real estate industry that literally outlined the neighborhoods where people of color lived in red ink. If you lived inside of the red lines, loans were considered risky and banks were less likely to give loans or even invest. The practice was banned in 1968, but the impacts live on, preventing Black families from amassing wealth at the same rate as their white neighbors on the other side of that red line. Need proof? According to the Federal Reserve, the net worth of a typical white family is $171,000. That's 10 times greater than that of a Black family. Homes in Black neighborhoods are generally and historically worth less than white homes because the developers and businesses that make a neighborhood, well, a neighborhood, are less likely to be there. That means the tax base is lower too, which has a trickle-down effect. Less tax dollars for schools means fewer kindergarten classes, fewer qualified teachers, fewer AP classes. That leads to lower graduation rates from high school and even fewer graduates from college. This is in part caused by the school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately impacts people of color. Institutional racism is more narrowly defined as the overt and covert forces blocking people of color from accessing the same opportunities as white people. Many of these children may benefit from additional educational and counseling services. Instead of getting the help they need, they're isolated, punished, or incarcerated. Once you have a criminal record, it invades all aspects of your life. Getting everything from a job to an apartment becomes that more difficult. Many people believe their communities are over-policed, presumed to be overly dangerous, but consider this. Black and brown people account for 30% of the U.S. population, but account for 43% of people killed by police and more than half of the incarcerated population. Institutional racism goes beyond just serving time. Something as simple as hair can be used to discriminate. Rules at school and the workplace that don't allow for dreadlocks, cornrows, and braids, they discriminate and don't take into consideration hair texture and singles out people based on their physical traits, creating rules where rules aren't needed, rules that control people of color. So, who gets to make all of these rules in society? Since America was colonized, it's been white people who've made these rules. First with slavery, then Jim Crow laws and separate but equal rules, and even creating limits on who can immigrate into the country. The term given to define that power, white privilege. It refers to whites' historical and contemporary advantages in access to quality education, decent jobs, a livable wage, home ownership, retirement benefits, and wealth, regardless of socioeconomic status.
Okay, so there's one more video. Katie, can you hear me?
Yes. Should I advance? Is it this one?
Yes. Then there's the next. Yes, the school to prison pipeline.
Okay, so back here, this one.
Yes, that one.
Excellent. I'll stop sharing and I will share that link in the chat. And you can also view that on your own device. These are excellent videos.
Yeah,
so the link is in the chat.
Watch that one.
Yeah, it's in the chat. If you want to click on it, we can watch it, and then we can reconvene to discuss the video.
There's this phrase that you might hear in the news sometimes, the school to prison pipeline. It's shorthand for how schools are funneling students, especially Black students, into the criminal justice system. It started in the 90s when schools responded to fears about crime with zero-tolerance policies, which mandated suspensions and expulsions for certain violations. They also cracked down on little things like talking back or uniform violations. The hope was that it would keep bigger problems from bubbling up. But as a result, out-of-school suspensions have doubled since the 1970s, and they keep increasing even though juvenile crime rates have now been dropping for years. Around the same time, the number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by a third between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. Sometimes the results are shocking. But the less visible effect is that schools are feeding the racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consider the fact that schools are more likely to have an officer on their campus if the student population is more than 50% Black. You might assume that that's because there's more crime at these schools, but although students at police schools are more likely to be arrested, they're not actually more likely to be charged in court for weapons, drugs, alcohol, or assault, at least according to one study. During the 2010-2011 school year, 1 in 6 public school students in the US were Black, but they accounted for 1 in 3 arrests at school. Same goes for other forms of school discipline. Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more frequently than white students. It actually begins in preschool. 18% of preschoolers are Black. But if all preschoolers suspended more than once, 48% are Black. Studies show that differences in behavior can't fully account for these disparities. Black students and white students are sent to the principal's office at similar rates, but Black students are more likely to end up with a serious punishment. One study found that white students are more likely to be suspended for provable offenses like smoking or vandalism. Black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective offenses like talking back or insubordination. Students who are suspended in school are more likely to later drop out or get arrested, so the federal government is asking schools to make suspension and expulsion the absolute last resort. In Oakland, California, public schools are trying something called restorative justice, where both parties in a conflict talk it out with a counselor instead of relying on punishment. The results are pretty encouraging. In the last 10 years, chronic absenteeism is down, and graduation rates are up in the schools that have tried it. Other cities and districts are also trying new policies. They're hoping that if their students end up in the criminal justice system, at least it won't be because the schools pushed them there.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
All right. How's that? Is that an okay slide?
Okay, so yes, that's okay. So we are going to take this time to just talk about the 2 videos that we have watched, and please think about these conversations in line with systemic racism and equality and everything that you've seen. What is it that we can do? So please go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to have breakout sessions. I think, Katie, we have 7 participants. Oh, myself included. Okay, so I don't know how we're gonna do this. Maybe because we're very few, we can have we can probably have 2 people in each. I don't know how this is gonna work out.
Let's do, Anastasia, given time, can we keep it to an all group discussion since we're
I think so.
We're
So
a few people anyway.
Yeah. So the first question we're going to look at is, how can we achieve social justice and equality in our schools? And in perspective to the 2 videos that we've just watched, and also basing your experiences. And since we've all been to the US, you can also use those examples as part of solutions. Like, what can we do? How can we achieve social justice and equality in our schools? Anybody who's ready to go can go. Anybody?
So we're just focusing on the first question?
Yes. Or maybe I just read all the questions and then I wanted us to do the first question first and go to the second question and then the third question and then the last question.
Sure. And this is a chance for all of you to share, practices that you have seen that have worked effectively in your contexts in terms of serving students equitably. thinking back to that vision or that visual that Anastasia showed us in the beginning, equality versus equity. Feel free to just jump right in.
So because of time, we only have 4 minutes. Yeah, we only have 4 minutes to go through all the 4 questions. So please jump right in and let's hear your views. So we're not writing, we're just discussing.
Yeah, go ahead, Suhair.
Okay, so actually, regarding this social justice and equality in schools, I believe that probably we can, first of all, we can start with the curriculum, and we put, of course, the curriculum, this curriculum design, we have to include issues related to like how the Industrial Revolution, for example, started at the beginning, and how we had this about the Black lives and things that has to do with the American history, for example. This is one thing. Another thing, we can teach our students we can mainly focus on the history of this and teach our students how the events started and the consequences that led to this social injustice. And number 3, we can also, I believe, focus on the quality of teaching terms. I mean, sometimes there are terms used when we teach our students some terms, probably they are not aware that these terms can be somehow related to racial segregation. For example, let us say, as I'm from Lebanon, for example, I'm not from the States. So sometimes, but I know that in the States, they refuse to hear the word Negroes, for example. They detest of this word. They do not like this word. So the quality, the terms taught also, we can avoid using these terms. So I believe number 1, curriculum, number 2, the history and how the revolution started, the consequences of these. And number 2, when I speak about revolution, probably I can incorporate some works of fiction, literature that show the consequences of inequality or racial segregation or this systematic racism. And number 3, as I said, is the terms. We have to take care and know the terms. To choose the terms we teach to our students.
That was great, Suhair. So I have a question for everyone. I know as teachers, you're very active in making your own curriculum. Is it difficult to find sources that tell history or how an event happened from the perspective of the other? You know, especially talking, for example, about the Civil War in the US, do you have access to materials that show what it was like to be a slave during those times from that perspective, instead of the typical perspective we find in history books?
Here in Lebanon, for example, yes, we have enough sources.
I think that
yes, sorry, continue.
It's okay, sorry, you can go.
Okay, in Lebanon, for example, we have enough sources, and I believe, but what's happening, Dr. Mark, is that when you want to teach this, I myself, for example, I want to teach about the history of the states. So sometimes you feel the problem is that students probably would prefer things that more have to do with watching and knowing more about this than me preparing and reading and doing all this survey. So they want to see things more than they want to listen to things and know how, I mean, more than lecturing. So this is one of the problems I face, for example, especially when teaching high school students. Yes, Anna, sorry.
I was disconnected for a minute, but it's okay. I don't know whether we finished discussing the first one or you're still answering to the question, or we can move on to the second one. In terms of what role our students can play, how can we help? What roles can our students play in advocating for equity and social justice and equality?
Abir, you have your hand raised. Feel free to speak.
Yes, thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Katie. I think as educators, we should like spread the idea of code of conduct. We should abide by a code of conduct and encourage students to obey it or to follow it. Like this, we shouldn't face this in social justice inequality in school, because if we have law or a code of conduct, everyone has to follow, and there will be penalties if discriminating a role or getting off it. So I think everyone will behave or act properly. And our role as educators, one of the main roles of educators is to deal in an equal way with everyone. We should stand in an equal way from each student. We shouldn't deal with them according to any factor. They are all equal to us. If they have this feeling, they would deal with each other according to it also. This is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Abir.
Thank you.
I think Anastasia has some concluding thoughts. She's just saying her network is a little shaky, so I'll pass it back to Anastasia.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm having really, really bad network. I have heard, I think, so is it so here that talked about looking at the curriculum and what we are teaching our children, the curriculum, the quality of teaching terms. So you mentioned the N word, which is not a word you'd use in the USA, but if you come to Zambia, for example, it's a word that everybody is comfortable to use, but then you have children here who are raising to think that it's okay. They think it's okay to use that word because they don't understand where it's coming from. And in as much as slavery was, the slaves that were being sold were coming from Africa, we don't actually understand fully what impact that had on people. Because when they left Africa and went to live in Europe, that's when they experienced what it means to be enslaved. So we don't have that experience, and we don't understand, even when you say you call someone by the N word, we don't understand the impact that it has on a person. But so if we can use our curriculum to teach our children that this is wrong and this has this repercussion and it has this impact on the lives of those who hear it, then they will have an understanding of that. And that Abia has raised about, us teachers not being discriminative, treating every child equally, and putting in place codes of conduct that would help our students to know that they are crossing the line, to know that they are discriminating, to know that just because somebody has a disability doesn't mean that they are less important than the person who is, physically able. So I just wanted to say also in my concluding words that when we talk about advocating for equality and social justice, it really has to start from where we are. And it starts from your area of influence. It starts by recognizing that there is a cancer here that needs to be dealt with. And we don't need to, take people to hospitals for chemo. Some of these things, we have the solutions ourselves. And it starts with what we are teaching our children and exposing our children to. Some of us here are parents. What are you teaching your children? Is it okay for a child to discriminate? Is it okay for a child to laugh at somebody because of their disability? And is it okay to do wrong to another child just because of the color of their skin? So also starting from your area of influence, students can volunteer. I like the American system where you have lots and lots of community service. Students can go to volunteer at a soup kitchen. They can go and volunteer somewhere else. We don't have that in Zambia. I wish you could have that, but from the very basic influence that you have, you start from there and you begin to speak and talk about these things. And at the end of the day, I think we don't need to go all the way to the president and start telling them what to do, but we can start from a very small sphere of influence and begin to build from the bottom up. So these are my last views. If anybody has anything to say in the next 1 minute, please feel free to do so. Questions, contributions, anything.
The only thing I want to mention is there's a great comment from Lama in the chat. So if you all look at that in terms of access to materials.
Any other thoughts?
Salama says the other difficulty we face is the availability of Creative Commons sources that materials writers can use. Yeah, that's true. We have that same challenge here too.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor, I would like to add one thing. One of the drawbacks in teaching about social justice is that sometimes, for example, when you have a Black student in class, the teacher gives him as an example for other students against social justice, which I believe that this is indirectly she is highlighting and adding fuel to fire here about social justice. This is a very simple example. For example, a social justice, one of our friends mentioned something about the disabled people. So sometimes when you have a disabled student in class, the teacher starts giving him as an example of if he, for example, if he does very well in class and he exceeds or surpasses his friends, the teacher starts giving him as an example for the friends. So for his friends. So here, the parents have not sent this disabled child to be used as an example in class, because this would be against social justice. Parents have sent him only to learn and to study in school. The same thing, sometimes when we have a Black student in class and the teacher starts highlighting and giving examples about this Black student in class that, for example, he exceeded or he was much better in performance than his other white students in class. So here, in other words, she is indirectly highlighting the effect of the drawback of implementing or instilling social justice in class. This is one of the drawbacks of teachers. So I believe that this is why I believe that teachers themselves sometimes have to this is what, when I spoke about the terms used in class and how to approach this issue in class. So sometimes if I'm giving an example about a Black student in class who is already there, this does not mean that I am supporting social justice, as I am on the other way, I'm indirectly highlighting its drawback, and as if I'm spotting light or on the drawing the students' attention that a Black student can be better.
Yeah, I hear you. I think most of the times we make such mistakes, and especially in how we use certain words. To read a comment from Lama, he says, involving students in service learning projects. Engage teachers creating content. This requires a lot of training to have high quality content. And then Gali, I don't know if that's how you pronounce your name, says, I think we should teach our students civility, volunteering, tolerance, respect for others, and encourage them to create and or join clubs, associations, and charities. So thank you so much. I will pass.
We might have lost her. Well, I'll conclude. I was going to thank her for a very engaging. Oh, yay, she's back. Can you hear us, Anastasia?
Sorry, Katie. Again,
That's okay.
I was just saying I'm handing over to you.
No, I was just going to say thank you so much for such an engaging.
I lost connectivity again. So I'm handing over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for such an engaging talk today. Thank you all of you who tuned in. It's great. It's always great to share thoughts together, as we did, during our programs. So to be able to continue these conversations in this capacity is great, but also wonderful to see you all. So thank you for your work in putting this together, Anastasia. And this has been recorded, so we will share it. So if you missed certain sections of it, you can go back and view those. Thank you everyone for your contributions. It's great to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a nice
Great
day.
seeing everyone.
Regards to all ITD staff.
Kathy, Anastasia, Abir, Soher,
Hi.
Zupin.
Nice to see you, Mark.
Richard. Hello, everyone.
Hello, hello.
See you.
Mark, do you know that behind you was your dog?
Richard.
Oh, Salty. Yes, she likes to participate. That's good.